Hey, it's Jeff at 650 Cycle, and this morning I am doing the commute on the XV250 Virago. Do a little bit of review of this bike and a little bit of why I have it and some things I've done to it. So, alright, so this is a 2003 Yamaha Virago XV250. It is the Virago. They later changed this same bike to the V-Star. They gave it a few updates, as cosmetic updates, but essentially the drivetrain has been the same since 1988 when they started making these. A few stats on the motorcycle itself. They are rated for somewhere between 18 and 20 horsepower, and they are also factory rated for 70 miles to the gallon, which I think is pretty good. They have a rating of, I believe it was 80 or 85 miles per hour on the top speed. I know I've not this bike, but I've had one that I've pushed up to 75. I think over a long period of time, a little bigger stretch, probably hit 80, 85, but I think that's pretty well topped out. I am going to do a top speed run on this today. I will hit some expressway on my way back, and we'll see. I've had this bike up to like 65. My commute is not incredibly exciting unless something happens along the way. They're having a bike race today, some sort of bike race, so we're probably going to see some cyclists, the kind that weren't smart enough to get one with a motor. The other thing I'd like to point out is that I'm not actually riding to work today. I'm just riding the route that I take to work. I am a teacher, and it is the first week of August, so I've got about 3 or 4 more weeks, 3.5 more weeks, something like that, until I actually have to start commuting again. But I've been so excited about this little bike that I decided to hop on it today and commute. Made some changes, and I'll talk about those in a little bit, but wanted to get some mileage on those and do some tests. So when I got this bike, I decided to do some baseline testing, not change anything. I got it knowing that I was probably going to make some changes. There, we hit 65. It's not a speed demon, but you can do better than that guy in that truck. He's on company time, so he's in no hurry. I shouldn't be either. I'm just messing around today. So, as I said, I wanted to do some baseline testing before I made some changes. I was pretty sure I was going to make some changes. Wasn't sure when, but they came sooner than later, and there's a reason. This particular bike is a beginner's bike, and it was geared very low for a beginner, making it easy for them to get up to speed. And as an experienced rider, I don't need to be in 5th gear at 40 miles an hour, which is where it was. It was like boom, 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 boom. You're shifting. Every 10 miles an hour you had to shift. It was ridiculous. So it was definitely geared low for a beginner. The nice thing about it is that there was a lot of low end power. It was really peppy on the low end. It was peppy all the way through, but at 55, 60, it really felt like your RPMs were too high. So as I was working on this bike, getting it ready to put on the road, did some research and found that. So in doing my research, I discovered that going from a 1645 gear set to a 1740 made it a much more usable bike and put the RPM range more usable. I completely agree with that. As you can see, the takeoff's not terrible. It was definitely a better takeoff before with the other gearing, but the trade-off is that, like right now I'm in 4th gear. No, I'm in 5th gear right now. I guess I'm having trouble keeping track. The trade-off is that right now it would have been in a much higher RPM. So the gearing change, I feel, is beneficial. And I feel like it's going to benefit me on this motorcycle. I wouldn't say that it's a necessary thing. It was fine before. It just felt like at the 55, 60 mile an hour range, it kind of felt a little, it was up in the RPMs, like higher than what it should be. So I'm gonna have to learn how to ride this bike with these gears. It made a big difference. I made a big change, and I didn't take baby steps. The bike itself, it runs great. It's very peppy. It runs, like, I like the way it runs. It's easy. I saw some reviews that, they said the brakes are terrible. I wouldn't say they're terrible, they're adequate. Which also you're not going to be doing 80 and have to get down to 55. You're not going to be in that situation. So not very often anyway. So the brakes that they have on here, I believe, are adequate. So maybe you're wondering what it is that I have this bike for. I also own a 2008 Harley-Davidson Ultra Classic. I like the bike, it's a great bike. On this commute, I get 40 miles to the gallon, and it handles it just fine. It's a fine bike for everything I've ever done with it. I don't have a problem with it. But since I started riding as an adult, I've always wanted this small cc, good miles per gallon, efficient motorcycle to commute on. It's just something I've wanted to do. And this came available, and I said, you know what, I'll take it. And I'll get to where I got it. I'll get to the story of where I got it later. But so why do I have this bike when I've got a really nice bike sitting in the garage at home? What would be the draw for me on this? The draw is that it's small, lightweight, commuter bike, easy to use. Handles all this nonsense traffic, and the big thing is it gets pretty good gas mileage. Now, my first tank of gas with the stock gearing, I got 48 miles to the gallon, and I'm laughing because I was riding it. I guess you could say I was riding it like I stole it. Very spirited riding, stretching out that RPM range. And with that gearing, you didn't need to. It was a much quicker, smoother shift. So you didn't need to stretch it out, but I was. And I got 48 miles to the gallon. So that was the trade-off in my spirited riding. There's an old classic right there. Is that a LeBaron? Something like that. She looked like she probably bought it new. So I changed my driving style, or my riding style. I went from very spirited, I dialed it back a notch or two, to old man, and I did much smoother takeoffs, shifting much smoother, and rode much closer to the posted speed limit. So my next tank of gas, the second with my stock gearing, I got 61 miles to the gallon. So a little change in driving habits, and I was able to increase my mileage by 13 from 48 to 61. So pretty impressed with that. Now what I'm hoping with this gearing change is that not only does it make it a much more usable bike for me in this commute, but it also lets me ride it more like I want to ride it, and stay in that range. I was hoping for 60, somewhere between 60 and 70. And I haven't been commuting. It's been like short short 8-mile distances. You know, 8 miles, bike sits for a while, 8 miles home, that type of stuff, 8-10 miles. Now, this particular commute is a little bit longer, and I can maintain probably 55 miles an hour for a little bit longer time. So I'm hoping that all of that changes. I did get this for the purpose of commuting and for the purpose of getting good gas mileage. Not necessarily because of the price of gas right now, but I like riding motorcycle, and I prefer to ride a motorcycle over drive a car. So it's just kind of an experiment on what I could do with this bike. And in looking at beginner bikes to do something like this with, I was always thinking Honda Rebel. And a few years ago I was working on one for a friend, and I rode it and I was like, I don't really like this bike. And it just feels really small. It's made all the way around for a much smaller person. This bike is a little bit bigger. I don't feel so cramped on it. So, and I'm 5'10", 200 pounds. It doesn't have any problem pulling me. I'm holding 55 pretty steady right now. This is probably the speed at which I'm going to commute. Like I said, later this morning, I'm gonna pop it up a little bit and see. We'll hit a section of expressway, a couple miles. Some people are like, oh, it doesn't go fast enough. Well, you know what? It's not made to go fast enough. If you're getting a motorcycle, get one that's going to do what you want it to do. If you want to go fast, get a bike that goes fast. If you know, this bike is a beginner bike, it's made to get good gas mileage, and that's why I got it. Not because it's a beginner's bike, but because it gets good gas mileage. So let's talk about where I got this bike. So this bike was originally purchased for a training facility, and it ended up, I don't know if it was purchased at the one I work at. I've only been there a few years, but it ended up there. And at some point, when the new coordinator took over, she asked a couple of us she says, I need an inventory of the bikes and what runs and what doesn't and what you guys are going to use. And so we got all that together for her, and there was a couple bikes that we really had no idea why they weren't being used, like this one, in pretty good condition. We got it started, and we didn't know why it had been pulled from service. And so in working through that process, I asked her, what are you going to do with those bikes? And she says, oh, I'm probably just going to scrap them. And I said, well, a couple of them are in pretty good condition. You know, could you sell them to me? And I don't know the process, and she didn't either. And it took her a while to figure it all out, because that wasn't her only job. But she figured it out, and I got 2 of them. This one was the better running of the 2. I had to put intake boots on it between the carburetor and the intake on the heads. They were cracked. I'm sure they were probably leaking, but I replaced them. And then I would take it around the block a couple times and it'd start cutting out. And originally, the first time I rode it, like a couple years ago, year and a half ago, it was doing that, and I was thinking it was a carburetor issue. And this time, I narrowed it down to the coils. The coils were heating up. Once they got warm, they were cutting out. It's a common issue with motorcycles, actually. So I put a new set of coils on, or a different set of coils. I haven't had an issue since. It's been running wonderfully. So I think it was probably taken from service for that very reason, was that it was cutting out. So this bike has been used and abused. It was a trainer bike for 3,500 miles. It had 3,500 miles put on it on the range, and like I said, they are brutal miles, and a lot of bikes, it's held up really well. A lot of bikes don't last. By the time they pull from service, it's like, this thing's a piece of garbage. and it's just beat up to the point of, yeah, there's, you know, let's just get rid of it. This one's not all that beat up. There's some dents in the tank and scratches and things like that, but overall, like, the blinkers are still attached, the headlight still functions, everything still functions and works and is there, as good as you would expect, and especially for a trainer. I was at 55 before I shifted into top gear. That's pretty good. There was no way you were doing that before. That to me is, I think that's gonna translate well into the efficiency of this bike. We'll see, but that's kind of why I'm riding it today. I want to get some miles on it, test everything out. I'm really curious to see what kind of mileage I get from this. So you can still buy these motorcycles new. The Yamaha Virago, or the XV250 V-Star is, they're like $4,500, somewhere around there, in that range. You can still get them if you can find one. You can. They still produce them. So, you know, if you're interested in a new one, you can find a new one. These aren't as prevalent as the Rebels. The Rebels I see all the time. I've seen for years. You know, $1,500 all day long. It doesn't matter what year. Definitely change that takeoff. And like I said, I have to readjust my skills riding this. I'm juggling between this and my Harley, and they are night and day in the way you ride them. If you're looking for a beginner bike, I think this is a great beginner bike, and especially with that gearing that it had. It was very low geared, so you're going to be shifting a lot at lower speeds. But I believe that's good practice for you. It's got a longer stretch. Like, I would seriously, 10 miles an hour, I would go from 20 to 30 and have to shift. And like I said, I'm doing 55 and just shifted into 5th gear. This is a wonderful change. It makes it feel a little, it makes it feel like it's a little bit underpowered, but it's not. And that's why I really think that, like, ideally, maybe a 42 tooth rear might be a better option for me. But we'll see. If I'm getting good mileage, if I pull 70 with this gearing and can ride it 55 miles an hour, I'm keeping it. What are my plans for this bike? I just plan to ride it. I don't plan to do anything other than that with it. I've seen some really nice ones. Some people have done some really nice custom stuff with them. Different exhaust, you know, which is typical of a motorcycle. And I watched one guy who took it all the way apart and, you know, painted and redid everything, and it was a super nice looking bike. But I don't really have the desire to do that. I have done just about all I'm going to do with it as far as I know. The gearing was the big thing, and I took care of that today, and I'm super happy with that. This bike, because it was a trainer, didn't have any mirrors on it, and I found some of these mirrors which I thought were factory Yamaha, but I don't think they are. They're a replica, because factory Yamaha ones say Yamaha on the backside, and these are just plain. So I'm not sure, but I don't think these are factory Yamaha. I'm getting used to them. This is so much fun. It's just stupid that I like riding this thing so much. All right, we hit some curves. The only curves for miles. Maybe one of these days I take this bike down Pine River. Alright, here comes the fun one. We gotta go this way and then switch to this way. It's not as, I don't know why, it's not as fun as it is on the Harley. The Harley's a blast going through there because it's so big you just feel it. You're like, woo, woo. One other thing I may change are the handlebars. These are definitely from the 80s. They're what some people call buckhorn handlebars. I call them pullback handlebars. They're not as bad as some that I've had, but they're not what I really like. So I may look into some other option for them. I would love to get like a riser with a flat bar. I think that would be really cool. So if I change anything on this bike, it would probably be that. Although these handlebars are not bad. I have other bikes that are projects that I'm changing things and, you know, putting money into. This bike, I just wanted to ride it. It wasn't a project bike, wasn't anything other than what I'm doing right now. That is so much better. I know you're sick of hearing me say that, but it's just so much better. 30 minutes at this point. There's the deer. I don't know if you've seen that. There was a deer wandering along. Probably about, I gotta go up and do a little loop around to get on 47 North. Somebody's got the cologne on really strong if I can smell it right here. And we're off. There I go, riding it like the Harley, taking big, wide, sweeping turns. I think I'm in fourth right now. I'm gonna wait till I get to the top of this hill and shift. I'm doing 65. I'm wide open throttle. Yep, there's fifth. So I made it to 65 in fourth. And I am wide open throttle. W-O-T. We're stuck at 68. Okay, we hit 70. I'll tuck a little bit, see if that helps. That's not helping much. We're kind of stuck right at 70. I think we're maxed out right here. I'm giving it all she's got, Jim. I don't think we're not gaining anything. We're not losing, but we're not gaining. We're gaining a little bit on this van. He must be doing 68. Oh, we're losing speed. What's happening? Yeah, we're not hitting 85 on this bike with this gearing. we're topped right out at 70. But that's not bad, you know. But maybe this guy would turn, since maybe I'm catching draft off of him and that's why I couldn't go any faster. I doubt it. I don't know. I was expecting 75. I was expecting to hit 75. I think that gearing affected that. But the trade-off is that I can cruise at 60 miles an hour very easily. Watch my takeoff. 2, 3, I'm in at 55, I just shifted into fourth. 60 miles an hour, I shifted into fifth. Couldn't do that before. And it'll hold this. It's like having an overdrive. It's like a highway gear right here. I'm just gonna hold this gear, or hold this speed in this gear, and I think my mileage is gonna be there. Pretty happy with it. Three, 4, 5. Yeah, it runs fine. There's not a lot in that top gear. There's just not a lot of pull. It's more of a maintain rather than having any pull. Like I can accelerate a little bit from 55 to 60, 60 to 5 to, or 60 to 65, but there's not a lot there. But again, I'm perfectly fine with that. As long as I can hold 55, 60 miles an hour and I can maintain that mileage that I was getting, 60 to 70 miles to the gallon, I'm happy with those gears. I probably won't change them. Just testing out that friction zone a little bit. Yeah, I keep forgetting to cancel the signals. I said I'm spoiled. The Harley does it for me. It's got this weird key down on the side. Kind of strange. Let's do a walk around. So there is the 2003 XV250. Yeah, we are on the about midway. I could adjust that, I suppose. As you can see, there's some scrapes on the exhaust. Banged up tank. There's a big dent over here, but overall not bad, especially considering the 3,500 training miles. The tire on the front was brand new, so I'll get some miles out of that. Some scrapes and scratches, but nothing serious. Still in pretty good shape. Not styled too bad. I do like the styling of it. I don't mind the Rebels, but I do like the style of this one a little bit better. Not because it's a V-twin. I just think that it looks a little bit better. And there you have it. I'm gonna wrap this video up, so make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel so you can get all my content. And if you're out riding, ride safe.